Ottoman Turkish. Hello, dear followers. Today, we will focus on the subject of Ottoman Turkish with our esteemed instructor, Tahsin Melan. I hope you watch and listen without getting bored. Welcome, Sir Tahsin. We have some questions regarding Ottoman Turkish that we would like you to enlighten us on. We would be very pleased if you could shed some light on this topic.
Hello. Welcome. Of course, we will do our best to answer your questions with the knowledge and ability we possess.
Thank you very much, teacher. I would like to ask my question in one go. What has been the influence of Ottoman Turkish on Turkish? Has it contributed or caused harm? What is the current understanding of Ottoman Turkish? Could you give us a brief overview?
First of all, before delving into the main topic, I would like to make a couple of remarks. These remarks will be related to linguistic studies that tend to lean towards conservatism. The most important thing we should not forget is that language cannot be manipulated, it follows its own process, and every existing, living word cannot be simply eradicated from our language. Furthermore, I would like to emphasize that Turkish words will not lose their essence. Now let's get to our topic. Your questions are very good and equally important. However, unfortunately, the answers may not be very brief. Because the answers to your questions cannot be confined to 3 to 5 lines, can you imagine we are questioning a history of approximately 700 years?
No problem, teacher. We will listen with patience and pleasure.
Firstly, I would like to briefly explain the term Ottoman Turkish that I mentioned. Between the 13th and 20th centuries, during the reign of the Ottoman Empire, a new cultural language emerged, which was heavily influenced by Arabic and Persian, especially after the 15th century, and later by French. Moreover, Arabic letters were used. This language, Ottoman Turkish, mostly survived in written form. During those times, an ordinary Turkish citizen could not understand a text written in Ottoman Turkish, and neither could an Arab, an Iranian, nor a Frenchman. Unfortunately, the Turkish spoken by the people, called Lisan-i Avam, the language of the people, was degraded for centuries. It was neither adopted as the written language nor as the language of science or literature. There was an incredible gap between the language spoken by the people and the official language. Semseddin Sami summarized the peculiarity of this language as follows: if you tell it to an Arab, he won't understand; if you tell it to a Persian, he won't understand; if you tell it to a Turk, he won't understand. It is observed that Sanasi, in his book Muntahabatai Izar, 1862, where he occasionally turned to Turkish, made a pre-explanation stating, "I wrote it in the language of the people," so that his language wouldn't be criticized. In conclusion, we can say that Turkish, which was ignored for centuries and avoided in usage, pushed to the background during the Ottoman period, struggled with death and attempted to be buried alive, fell into a pitiable state. Despite all these negatives, while some were thinking and writing in Ottoman Turkish, the people preserved their native language. They raised poets like Yunus, Pir Sultan Abdul, Dadaloglu, and Karakayaglan. Meanwhile, they also preserved and maintained oral and written language sources such as the Orkhon inscriptions, Kutad Gubaylig, Didi Korkut, etc., from their past. Especially, oral literature has made a significant contribution to the power of language over time. This culture has been passed down from generation to generation and will continue to be passed down. We know at which stages the language changed during this process. However, these changes did not cause the language to lose its essence. The language has been preserved and maintained by its real users, that is, the people. Today, thousands of our words that are on the verge of disappearing in Anatolian dialects are waiting to be collected. Intellectuals who adopt the statements of foreign linguists claiming that Turkish is sterile and not a language of science, instead of criticizing, would be much more useful if they dedicated their time to compilation studies. Unfortunately, this also requires effort and time. But sitting at a desk, manipulating existing knowledge, and presenting it as something new is much easier. However, a scientist can only be worthy of his name when he adds an unknown to a known and makes two knowns. With the establishment of the Republic, which marked the rebirth of the Turkish nation and culture, we see the national struggle regarding Turkish through the intensive efforts of the Turkish Language Association under the leadership of Ataturk, 1932 to 1983. Ataturk emphasized the importance of this endeavor by stating, "I am joining this mobilization and starting today to cleanse my language of foreign words." Although this event was criticized by some writers and prominent figures, the majority experienced the joy of achieving the language identity they longed for. For instance, H.C. Usaklagil expressed his sentiments as follows: "These past few days, I went through a work I wrote 40 years ago. I wanted to review it. Despite using all my patience and perseverance, I could only read about 5 or 10 pages. I felt ashamed of the language I used." What did the urge for ornamentation, the admiration for Persian and Arabic achieve? I believe the answers implicit in the lines have not disappointed you. However, I cannot refrain from adding the following: the Ottoman Empire was a great civilization and culture on a corresponding scale. Despite the negative aspects during its decline and in terms of language, our past, history, culture, and source of pride. Regardless of what anyone says, it is impossible to change this historical fact, and it will remain so. In this context, I also want to mention a fascinating characteristic of Ottoman Turkish. This language borrowed words from Arabic and Persian, and so ingeniously incorporated and developed them that it gave back new words derived from these borrowed ones. In other words, Arabs and Persians borrowed words from Ottoman Turkish. Can you imagine the power of usage and artistic ability in this evolutionary process? If you have read the poems of poets like Fuzuli, Nedim, and Baki, you will see the pinnacle of artistry in terms of both words and meanings. If you can appreciate it, it will mean a lot to you. Upholding these legacies, which contain the mysteries of 700 years, is equivalent to embracing our past. It is neither scientific nor nationalistic to harbor enmity towards Ottoman Turkish simply because it used Arabic script. This enmity towards Ottoman Turkish has grown so insidiously that unfortunately, the number of scholars who read our own archives and bring them to light has dwindled to a handful. Even more unfortunately, much of our data is obtained from the research and studies of foreign Turkologists. Just think about how healthy this could be. Wasn't it the same mistake and inadequacy of those parrot-like historians who blindly accepted the statements of Austrian historian Hammer's work, The Great Ottoman History, as if it were a sacred book descended from the heavens, and even embraced his "barbaric Turks" narrative? It's shameful that foreign scholars are trying to teach us our own history. Where else has such dishonor been seen? Whenever one of our scientists tries to do something, they are immediately obstructed, strangely enough. Without falling into any political judgment or manipulation, we must uphold Ottoman Turkish as a cultural language. If today we have become unable to understand a few Ottoman Turkish words mentioned in Ataturk's speech, Nuduk 1919-27, in the section addressing the youth, and cannot teach these to the young generation, if we are incompetent, hesitant, and fearful of learning, then it is outright conservatism and ill intention. How absurd can it be to pretend to be Ataturkist but not understand Ataturk's words? Have you ever traveled to Turkey through Bulgaria or Greece? They have joined the European Union. The Latin alphabet is in use. But, despite all the oppression it has faced for years, they continue to use the Cyrillic alphabet, forced upon them by the country that colonized them. They do not discard it at the drop of a hat. Not only do they not discard it, but they insist on using it, proudly declaring, "It is my history, my past, my culture." Another nation still keeps its old alphabet alive, despite it being a relic of a dead language. And they do so proudly. No one asks, "Why do your signs mostly have these letters?" or "How can we read these signs?" Yet, what do we do? In a bid to please foreigners, we try to hang English signs before Turkish. We are forced to use letters other than the 29 in our language, as if the mother tongue of this nation were English. Isn't this anything but linguistic flattery driven by a desire to please someone? What a joke, saying we will join the EU. Even crows don't laugh at that anymore. Moreover, after losing our honor, living should become unbearable. How fortunate we are to be heirs to such a culture and nation. I am against linguistic conservatism and exaggeration. However, I make no distinctions in word choice. I act based on the proverb, "A stone is heavy and sand is weighty," and do not hesitate to use words inherited from Ottoman Turkish. Because these words I mentioned have kept up with today's language, they are Turkish. Their only fault is being old concepts and being considered inferior. Yet, these are our words, which have served the Turkish language for years. Therefore, they deserve the respect they are due. Putting everything aside, it cannot be expected that anyone would be naive enough to use a flowery language. A person's vocabulary reflects their level of culture. Therefore, we should not fear knowledge or learning. They do not open the door to any loss alongside their advantages. For example, in my vocabulary, tebessum, smile, coexists with gülümseme, smile. For me, this is not a loss but a gain. There is no harm in using both of them. Although they are considered synonymous, they are not. I always feel that tebessum reflects sincerity, warmth, and affection, while gülümseme conveys a simpler appearance. There are countless examples like this. The meanings behind words can only be revealed through living, experiencing, and feeling. If we can perceive the emotions behind words and the subtle differences between similar words, we can be much more constructive in language and not confine the rich expressive power of Turkish words to a single word. I don't understand the logic of excluding everything by saying, tu kaka, all rubbish, and its contribution to language. Ottoman Turkish has now passed its era, its rule, and its existence. There is no reason to fear a phantom. Those who have brought the subject to this point should be ashamed. All that remains for us is words. And they are not so foreign, nor so numerous, nor so unacceptable, they are ours. As long as they are present in our language, not frowned upon in usage, and accepted by the people, they will continue to exist. Trying to exclude and destroy them by inventing forced equivalents is not a gain but destruction for language. It contradicts with the people. One of the reasons for the communication gap between generations is these inconsistencies in language. We see how different the use of language is between individuals with a 30 to 40-year age gap. At this rate, in 30 years, we will be the ones not understood by the new generation. Eventually, words that are not embraced, when their time comes, will fall out of use one by one and be condemned between the pages of books. Yet, knowing of the existence of new foreign words, especially English, that are stealthily trying to enter is much more painful and thought-provoking. The real problem is being able to prevent these invasive words of today, to hinder them. Otherwise, we will soon be searching for even Ottoman Turkish. To start simplifying language, instead of trying to exclude a word that has served our language for centuries and dealing with them, we should stop newcomers, the contemporary ones, those that have not yet reached the level to stamp their mark on the language. If we can successfully achieve this stage, if we know how to say stop by cutting off the entrance of foreign words, then we will have more power and face to fight with what's inside us. Otherwise, we'll just keep struggling within circular discussions where everyone is making judgments as they please, with a language that's no different from a patchwork bag. It should be remembered that language enriches not through coercion but through love and sharing.
Thank you very much for the information you provided, Sir Tahsin. You know the saying, one touch, 1,000 sighs. Isn't it exactly the case here?
You've said a very beautiful and appropriate saying. Indeed, it's been a long-standing debate. Hopefully, we can contribute a little to our language.
Absolutely, sir. I believe your explanations will shed light on those who harbor animosity towards words. Thank you again for your time. Looking forward to another conversation. Stay well.